Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishvara Krishna Vishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikansa Swami Nitanamini. Namo Vishvara Krishna Vishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitanamini. Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhashtavi Vishatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, welcome back to the second day of our study of Vedanta Syamantaka by Srila Radha Damodar Goswami. So, yesterday we discussed briefly about what this work is all about, and we also discussed around the controversy that is surrounding the authorship of this work. So, we discussed that it's actually not a work written by Baladevi Bhushan, but it was written by his spiritual master Radha Damodar Goswami. And we also saw a reference, a quotation, a reference basically from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 7, text 72, as to why we should study this book, why Vedanta has to be studied. So, there are two words in this book, or rather the title of this work. There is Vedanta and there is Syamantaka. So, the Syamantaka part we are or should be aware of the story from Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto about the Syamantaka jewel. So, why it is called Vedanta Syamantaka we will see a bit later. But today we are going to go a little bit more detail into what we started yesterday about why we should do Vedantic study. So, although the purport which Srila Prabhupada or which we discussed yesterday was quite clear, but still there are some nuances or some subtle understanding that we should grasp before we get into the study of this work. So, there are several aspects of Vedantic study. So, when we speak of Vedantic study, there are some technical things that we are supposed to know, because this is not like a study of Puranas, where there is some philosophy, there are rituals are there, regulations are mentioned, then stories are there. This work does not mention, it has, okay, some stories, instances are there just to prove the supremacy of Lord Vishnu. So, those kind of instances will come. But Vedantic study basically means to get into that mold of attaining transcendental knowledge. So, for that, the instruments have been given by Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srila Prabhupada explains on that in his purports. So, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that Shastra should be understood in three aspects. So, that is Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. So, Sambandha is basically understanding the relationship of the Jiva with Ishvara, the relationship of Jiva with this material world, the relationship of Ishvara with this material world, how the Jiva is bound by karma, and how the time basically orchestrates all these things, and how the time is actually an eternal potency of the Lord. So, this is all Sambandha Gyan. And Abhideya is when we understand all this, and then after that we do what we are supposed to do, that is re-establish our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So, that is Abhideya. And Prayojana is the fruit of love of Godhead. So, once we have perfected the practice of pure devotion service, then we attain pure devotion service. So, so that's how it is. So, this book Vedanta Syamantaka is primarily a Sambandha Shastra. So, Sambandha Shastra means, we discussed yesterday that there are 5 aspects, Ishwar, Jiva, Kala, Karma and Prakrti, that we are going to discuss about. And this work is primarily going to elaborate on this Sambandha aspect. And it's important. Why it's important is because if we do not know what is the Sambandha, then we will not be able to perform the Abhideya properly. It's a very important aspect, because unless we understand what our relationship is and what we are supposed to do, we will not be able to do it properly. So in everything that we do, we need to have proper knowledge. Even if we are cooking, if we are cooking in the kitchen, now we should know how the masalas taste. We should know when the vegetable has boiled or when it has been fried, whether it has been cooked or not. So there is some set of knowledge that is required. Some vegetables cook faster, some vegetables cook slow. So no, it's a science. Cooking is actually a science, and one should know the different features and characteristics of these vegetables. You should know different characteristics of the grain. Some pulses will not cook very fast. Some rice varieties will not cook very fast, but some rice varieties will cook very fast. So all those things have to be known. And only when the Sambandha Gyan is there, when we know that this is how different ingredients of our cooking that is their characteristic, then we can do proper cooking. We should know how the masalas would taste, how much salt has to be put, which type of salt we are using. It's a white salt, it's a brown salt, it's a mountain salt. Depending on that, everything will change. So one should know this. So here also, even simple thing like cooking, we have Sambandha Gyan there. So one should learn. So whenever we are learning something, that is Sambandha Gyan. And once we learn that, then only we can do the Abhideya process. We can get into this actual cooking process, and bhoga can be prepared. So similarly in devotion, and this is applicable in all aspects of life. So it's not that Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana is applicable only for Shastric study. Whatever we do in our life actually can be categorized into these three categories. You go for work, there is the knowledge transfer session, that is Sambandha Gyan. Then we actually work on it, that's Abhideya. Then finally the output comes, whether you have made a website or whatever it is, that's your Prayojana. So every small aspect in our life can be categorized into these three things, Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. So this is applicable to Shastric study also. And unless the Sambandha Gyan is proper, the Abhideya will be completely messed up. Correct? Abhideya will not be proper, will not be able to do the activity properly. So therefore, this understanding of these 5 aspects, and also there are 6 chapters in this book. The first thing that we are going to discuss is about the pramanas. So that also comes under the category of Sambandha Gyan only. So if we have the Sambandha Gyan properly, then the Abhideya or devotional aspects, spiritual practices can be rendered properly. And yesterday we discussed that Sahajiyas are on one side of the scale and the impersonalists are on the other side, and both of them have problem with Sambandha Gyan. So because the Sahajiyas do not have proper understanding of the Vedantic concept about supremacy of Krishna, there are so many upper sampradayas also where people, they get into different kinds of activities pretending themselves to be the Supreme Lord and the other person has to be the energies of the Supreme Lord. So all that mess up happens because of incorrect understanding, or rather lack of understanding of Sambandha Gyan. And from impersonalist point of view, again, their Sambandha Gyan is not proper because they do not understand the relationships between Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, Karma and Prakrti. They might study, but they study it in isolation. They study it in isolation and finally they say everything is one. But the relationship is the most important aspect of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Ishvara is there, Jiva is there. And it's actually laziness on the part of impersonalists to just say that Ishvara and Jiva are equal. Because there's a relationship, there are nuances, there are subtleties, there is rasa. And all these things have been described in the Vedic literatures. So, to just overcome those, to just neglect all those things, to just jump over them and just say based on few Mahavakyas or what they call as Mahavakyas, to say that Jiva and Ishvara are same is actually totally bogus. So they also lack in Sambandha Gyan. So this work is important because it establishes the Sambandha Gyan of the Gaudiya Vaishnavism line. And as we discussed yesterday, Srila Radha Damodar Goswami was the first one who elaborated, or rather who gave these 5 separate tattvas or truths through which we can understand the entire Vedic philosophy. Correct? So that's the proper understanding. So that's one aspect of it, Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. That is how we are supposed to approach this book. So this is Sambandha Gyan. And if we say even those scriptures or those works of our Goswamis which are actually elaborating on the Abhideya practices, most prominently our Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu or Nectar of Devotion. So Nectar of Devotion is elaborating on the practices that aspiring devotee, a sadhana bhakta, is supposed to do, and of course Raganuga Bhakta, how he acts and what kind of practices he is supposed to do. So this is Abhideya Gyan, but then still it falls under the category of Sambandha. Only when we start performing those activities, then we are performing this Abhideya activities. That is how it is to be understood. So when we study Shastra, using our mind, our intelligence, and try to understand the Lord, try to gain His mercy in attaining proper understanding, all that falls under the category of Sambandha Gyan. Abhideya comes when we are actually performing that activity, when we are doing that practice, and Prayojana is attainment of that goal. So Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, the knowledge of getting, the knowledge of Sambandha, the knowledge of Abhideya, knowledge of Prayojana, all is categorized under Sambandha Gyan only. So this work also we will see that it will be, the discussion will go in such a way that it will lead to the actual Abhideya, to pure devotional service, but then elaboration of pure devotional service will not be present in this work. So it is Sambandha. So it's Sambandha Gyan, talking only about Sambandha Gyan. So it's not related, or it's not directing us, although it's directing, but it's not elaborating on the Abhideya and the Prayojana principles. Correct? And so that's one aspect. Another point that we have to understand is that Vedanta, when we speak of Vedanta, we say it's Vedanta Sutra. That's just the generic understanding. But actually, Vedanta means the study of Upanishads. The study of Upanishads is Vedanta. So within the Shrutis, there are 4 categories. Srila Vyasdev categorized them into 4. There are Brahmanas, there are Samhitas, there are Aranyakas, and there is Upanishads. So this Brahmana, so Samhita is the first portion that a student of Vedic culture goes through. So when a boy joins Gurukula, he undergoes the Samhita portion, basically memorizing of all the mantras and reciting them. That is Samhita portion. So I'm speaking in a very generic manner. We may discuss this more in detail when we come into this Pramana section, but just for understanding what actually is Vedanta, we'll discuss for a couple of minutes all these aspects. So Samhitas are this mantra portion where the mantras are learnt, the intonations are learnt, and then they are recited. Brahmana portion is actually the usage of these mantras for different rituals, for worshipping the deities, for performing different activities according to what is given in the 4 Vedic literatures, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samveda, Atharvaveda. What are given there, how to practically use these mantras for different types of rituals, for yagyas, for different demigods. Mantras are there for different demigods. Different demigods have different mantras. So like that, all those mantras are learned in the Samhita portion, but then the application of it comes in the Brahmana portion. Then the Aranyaka portion is also an elaboration or the metaphysical portion of these two. So when the mantras are actually contemplated upon and their subtle meaning and intricate meanings are attempted to be understood, those form the basis of Aranyaka portion, where the explanation of the mantras are given. And finally, it comes to the final conclusion of all these activities that have been discussed, all this ritual portion, the mantra portion, the metaphysical understanding of this mantra portion. When all these things have been completed, then one comes to the study of Upanishads. So that is why, roughly speaking, all these 4 portions of the Shrutis can be categorized into 4 ashramas. So Brahmacharya ashram is where the mantras are learned. Grihastha ashram is where these mantras are employed for different rituals and different sacrifices to perform one's nitya karma, naimittika karma and things like that. Aranyaka portion is when one starts to detach himself from his grihastha life, from materialistic life, and Upanishads is when he is approaching the transcendence, when he wants to know about transcendence, having done all the Vedic, having performed all the Vedic rituals and everything that is mentioned in the 4 Vedas. So Upanishads are the Vedanta, are the conclusions. So with respect to these 4, when you say Brahmana, Samhitas, Aranyakas, Upanishads are the conclusion of the Veda. So Vedanta actually means the study of Upanishads. And this study of Upanishads is then codified into this Vedanta Sutra form. So we will see in forthcoming, there are some references which I have put. So there are 6 systems of Vedic philosophy. So if we categorize the people within this material world, there are 2 types of people. One who has faith in the Vedic literatures, who are called as Astika, and the others who do not have faith in the Vedic literatures, who are called as Nastika. So Nastika system within Indian culture are the Charvakas and the Buddhists. And within the Astika system, there are 6 different philosophies. Nyaya, then Vaisheshika, then Sankhya, Patanjali's yoga system, then Purva Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. So these are the 6 systems of Vedic philosophy. All 6 of them have faith, or they trust that the Vedic literatures are or we are supposed to gain knowledge, or they have faith in the Vedic literatures. Okay, simply put, that is how it is. But the actual conclusion of the Vedic literatures, the actual study of Upanishads, or actually understanding what Vedanta means, is not achieved by the 5 schools of thought. It's not achieved by Nyaya, it's not achieved by Vaisheshika system of Kannada, then Sankhya, propagated by Kapila, then Patanjali's yoga system, and Purvamimamsa. So these 5, although they refer to the Vedic literatures, but they do not come to the actual conclusion of Vedanta. So seeing this, then Vyasadeva, he compiled this Vedanta Sutra, where he's basically defeating, or basically he's counteracting all these 5 different philosophies, which, although referring to the Shrutis and Smrtis, although referring to the Vedic literatures, are actually not coming to the proper conclusion. So Gautama's this Nyaya, Patanjali, then Vaisheshika, then Sankhya, then Purvamimamsa. Purvamimamsa was propagated by Jaimini, and again, he gave stress to the Vedic rituals that are there, but he did not take it to the proper conclusion. So Vyasadeva compiled Vedanta Sutra primarily as an exposition, or in a sutra form, in a very concise and very concise and sutra form, to basically establish that the Vedanta philosophy, or the philosophy of the Upanishads, is the topmost or superior to all the other 5 philosophies. So that is Vedanta Sutra. So Vedanta Sutra is actually an elaboration, or rather the codified form of the Upanishads. And if you see the commentaries of all the acharyas, they primarily quote from the Upanishads to substantiate their claims of proper understanding of this Vedanta Sutra. So why we are discussing all these things? Just to establish the point that Vedanta actually means the study of Upanishads. Okay. Now, if we see, we are doing Vedantic study now, and we see here that Prakrti is also mentioned as one of the tattvas which has to be studied under Vedanta. Now, Vedanta, the understanding is that it is the study which will take us beyond this material world to transcendence. Correct? So, why do we have to study Prakrti? So, this actually is addressed in Bhagavad Gita also. So, if we see, the 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita are divided into 3 portions. You have this Karma Kand or Karma Yoga portion, the first 6 chapters. Then we have Bhakti Yoga, the middle 6 chapters. And finally, the last 6 chapters are called as Jnana Yoga or Sankhya Yoga. And if we see right from the 13th chapter, Krishna speaks a lot about Prakriti and Purusha. Correct? Kshetra, Kshetragya, Prakriti, Purusha, all those details have been elaborated upon. And furthermore also, if we see, the 14th chapter is the modes of material nature. And then the 16th chapter is the demoniac and divine nature. And then after that, 17th chapter is there. Then 18th chapter is there, which are basically talking a lot about the modes of material nature. So proper Vedic understanding or Vedanta understanding actually means understanding the working of this material nature also. Because unless we understand what is binding us, we will not be able to liberate ourselves from that. So the relationship of the jiva, which is contaminated, the contaminated relationship of jiva with this Prakriti have to be understood, so that one becomes careful what he is not supposed to do of. Because understanding the relationship between jiva and Ishvara gives the positive aspect of what his spiritual practices are supposed to be. But the understanding of the relationship between jiva and the Prakriti and the workings of Prakriti basically are those portions which he is supposed to avoid. So there is Anukul practice, there is Pratikul practice, correct? So Anukul is that we are supposed to, the positive aspect of it. And Pratikul is that which we are supposed to reject of, which we are not supposed to. So our interaction with this material world, our attachment to this material world, our desire to enjoy this material world, all those things have to be given up. So if you see the Upanishads, those statements are also there, where this one's material desires, one's attachment to this material world are completely abhorred, or completely rejected, or completely despised in these statements. So Upanishads speak about Prakriti also, and the jiva's relationship with Prakriti, because that's required for making proper progress in devotional service. So both these things are there. So one has to do the positive aspect, at the same time one has to give up these negative aspects also, which basically bind us within this material world. So sense gratification has to be given up. Prabhupada made this very easy. He said, don't do sense gratification, that's all. Sense gratification if you do, then you will not be able to make progress in devotional service. It's a simple line. But then we are discussing all the intricate Upanishadic terms here to make the same point. So actually Srila Prabhupada made everything easy for us. Correct? And one more aspect, or the third point. So we discussed about Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, what actually is Vedanta. And the third point is that Puranas are actually, the Puranas or the statements of different Puranas which speak about pure devotional service and which give knowledge of these 5 factors are also considered as the commentary on Vedanta Sutras only. So directly we know that Srimad Bhagavatam is the commentary on Vedanta Sutras. So this is very clear. In Garuda Purana it's mentioned Arthoyam Brahma Sutranam, and then it goes on elaborating how Srimad Bhagavatam is the commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So we will read one quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati now, and there he very specifically writes that it's not only Srimad Bhagavatam but other Vedic literatures also, not only the Puranas but the Itihasas as well, those statements which are in line with the Upanishadic understanding are to be considered as authentic, are to be considered as commentaries on Vedanta Sutra only. So normally you see Mayavadis or Advaitavadis, they accept the Puranas as authentic, they accept Smriti as authentic, but they will not use the portions of Smritis for elaborating on their Vedantic commentary. So in Vedanta Sutra, if you see, they will primarily resort only to Upanishads and other Shruti Vakyas, but they will not quote much from the Puranas. But the proper understanding of Vedanta itself is that the Puranas being the Smritis and extension of the Vedic scriptures themselves, they are called as fifth Veda. We will see as we go ahead with this work, they are called as fifth Veda. So Puranas are in line with what is mentioned in the Vedas and the Upanishads, and those statements which are directly talking about pure devotional service unto Krishna are to be accepted as commentaries on different portions of the Vedanta Sutras, as elaborations on proper understanding of the Upanishadic statements. So Puranas are also there, and in Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami, he elaborates on this point quite a lot. So we will not be going into all these details. So with this understanding, we'll just read through some of those references. And this one reference from which is in Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. This is Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. This is chapter 7 in volume 2. And this is an article, or it's a lecture actually of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and which has been transcribed. So it's Vaishnavism and Vedic literature. I have not included the entire lecture, but there are some specific portions which we have to read through to understand what Vedantic study actually means and how we are supposed to approach this subject matter. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had to address the erroneous outlook of those supposed Gaudiyas who consider study of the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra impersonal speculation and thus not above but below their level of realization. So yesterday we saw this quote. Srila Prabhupada spoke about the cheap Vaishnava Sahajiyas who do not care to study the Vedanta philosophy as commented upon by the 4 Acharyas. So we are continuing in that same theme. Notwithstanding that Acharyas of all recognized Vaishnava Sampradayas had composed commentaries on these works, certain Sahajiya groups, under the misconception that real devotees discuss only Leela and never philosophy, most offensively regarded even Govinda Bhashya as loathsome philosophical ideation, and Acharyas of the caliber of Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan as not pure devotees, but mixed whose approach to bhakti was tainted by non-devotional jnana. So these are misconceptions. And actually, anyway, that's a side point, but there are some Vaishnava lines in Vrindavan itself who completely reject the study of scriptures. So there is this Radha Vallabha deity, the Radha Vallabi Sampradaya, who consider their Acharyas Hit Harivamsh and Hariram Vyas and all. They do not study scriptures at all. They completely reject the study of scriptures, even of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they are totally into this devotional worship of the deities and discussing Krishna's Leela, Bhava. But then Gaudiya Vaishnava line is not that. Our line is Bhakti Vedanta and Bhakti Siddhanta, and from that we achieve Bhakti Vinod. That is our line. So scriptures have to be understood. And even if you see Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he does mention that jnana has to be rejected. Anya bilashita shunyam, jnana karma dhyanavritam, anukulena krishnanu, shiranam bhakti uttama. Right? We know this verse. And it comes in the first chapter of Bhaktisiddhanta Samrita Sindhu itself. And he says, no, karma and jnana has to be rejected. But then he makes this, he adds this verse also, anavrita. So, anya bilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam. So, those knowledge, so that knowledge and karma, which actually hides devotional service, pure devotional service. Anavritam is covering, which covers pure devotional service, that has to be rejected. But that knowledge which actually reveals pure devotional service, the characteristics of Krishna, the actual swarupa of the jiva, and his interaction with the Lord and the Lord's potencies, that knowledge has to be cultivated. And we see that in Acharya's works also. They have given so many philosophical points. So our understanding of Vedanta is not impersonal in nature, or we are not studying here just to gain some knowledge. We are studying Vedanta Syamantaka, we are studying Vedanta philosophy to strengthen ourselves, so that with that transcendental knowledge we become more fixed up in devotional service and make tangible progress. And Rupa Goswami also in the second chapter, or in the second section of, second chapter of Bhaktisiddhanta Samrita Sindhu, he quotes this verse from Narad Pancharatra, the Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatri Vidimbina Ekantiki Harir Bhaktir Utpata Eva Kalpate. So without Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Pancharatra, we cannot understand proper devotional service. It will only be in the level of bhava, sentimentalism. And sentimentalism cannot liberate one from this material world. So that is proper understanding. Okay, unless we have proper Sambandha Gyan, unless we know how we are entangled within the modes of material nature, it is not possible for us to liberate ourselves or to go back home, back to Godhead. So those devotees who completely reject the study of scriptures, study of Shastra, study of Upanishads and Vedantic philosophy, they are basically putting themselves in a precarious position. Apparently, it might seem that they are not interested in interacting with this material world, and they are totally in bhava stage or totally in pure devotional service. They are thinking only about Krishna. But any material allurement that comes to them, they'll totally become attached to that and they'll fall down. So that we will see. There are so many Babajis in Radhakund, there are so many so-called devotees, Sahajiyas in Vrindavan. They start with pure devotional service. Radha Krishna Leela, Ras Leela, meditate upon that, meditate upon your eternal Swarupa, this, that and all. But then if there is some interaction between the man and the woman, then fall down. Because they do not know Pumsastriya Mitini Bhava Meta. They have not studied Bhagavatam. They do not understand that they have to be careful in the interaction between men and women. And because that understanding is not there, it has not entered their consciousness, all this bhava, all these high talks basically leads them to their downfall. So that is why our Vedantic study is actually very important. Correct? So, we'll continue. Following the previous Vaishnava Acharyas who gave paramount importance to Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, while also upholding the dignity of the other Puranas, the Upanishads and other Vedic texts, Srila Sarasvati Thakur explicated that the root of all fallacies concerning these scriptures was miscomprehension of the nature, scope and purpose of Vedic knowledge and literature. So this is applicable to the impersonalist also. So it's not only about Sahajiyas, but the impersonalist also, because of the miscomprehension of the nature, scope and purpose of Vedic knowledge and literature, they also do not achieve their destination of attaining Brahman. In the course of a long discussion at the residence of the learned and inquisitive Zamindar, Sri Sharadindu Narayana Rai, Srila Saraswati Thakur addressed the contention of those Prakriti Sahajiyas who spurned the Vedas, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita and other such Shastras as lower than Srimad Bhagavatam and thus largely irrelevant. So there's another group, those who accept Srimad Bhagavatam but they reject other Puranas and Vedic literatures. Because Bhagavatam speaks about all this rasa, especially the 10th canto. Srila Prabhupada writes also, right, that don't jump to 10th canto. Don't jump to 10th canto. Read the entire first 9 cantos, then go to study the 10th canto. That way the purification and whatever philosophical understanding one is supposed to get, he would have attained by that time. And this is evident in Srimad Bhagavatam also. If we see the first canto and Prabhupada's commentary on the first canto is mainly very philosophical, and the later portion of the first canto is speaking a lot about Varnashrama Dharma and other aspects. So that's an introduction or an elaboration. So of all the 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, if one studies first canto with Prabhupada's purports, he will have a very good understanding of what is going to come or what is present in the rest of the 11 cantos. And we see in second canto and third canto primarily, there are not Leelas mentioned of the Lord. What are we seeing? The first chapters, Shukdev Goswami, from the first chapter itself, He's basically destroying if any material illusions still pertain or still are there within Vishnu Parishit Maharaj's mind. Then he's removing all that in the first chapter. Then after that, levels of God realization. Then he's speaking about the universal form. Then finally, as we go, then Narad Muni approaches Lord Brahma. He wants to understand who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. Then Brahma expresses his understanding, his realization. So second canto, there is no Leela at all. It's completely elaboration of the philosophy. And then in the third canto, we see then slowly, the manvantaras are started to being explained. And there also primarily, if we see, there are many philosophies. Lots of philosophical understanding comes. With the appearance of Varahadev, how Hiranyaksha, the Kumaras, all Kumaras were in transcendental knowledge, how they got into devotional service. So that aspect comes. Then Viduras and Maitreya's Sambandha, completely philosophical. And as we come to the later portion of the third canto, then we have Kapiladev instructing Mother Devahuti. And it's totally about Prakrti. First, in the 25th chapter, I think, 25th or 24th chapter, he's speaking about the glories of devotional service. But then after that, the glories of devotional service have been explained. So one has to take up devotional service. This is the glory of devotional service, and one has to perfect his life. That is done. But right after that, I think it's 25th chapter. And from 26th chapter till the end of the third canto, he's speaking about Sankhya philosophy. And he's speaking about the interaction of the living entity with this Prakrti, with this material world. So although the glories of devotional service is there, you are supposed to perform devotional service. That is the highest state. But then this is also there. This is how one is supposed to understand how he is entangled within this material world and how he is supposed to get out of this. So we see, the examples or what we are discussing here is actually the way Srimad Bhagavatam takes us. The journey of studying Srimad Bhagavatam takes us through these processes. Then in fourth canto, fifth canto also. In fourth canto, there are several instances. Then at the end of the fourth canto, there is philosophical, allegorical discussion, another way of explaining the philosophy. Then fifth canto, then Maharaj Priyavrata's story comes. Then we are speaking about the creation of this material world, this cosmology of this material world. And then by the end of this fifth canto, we are again saying that if you are after all this, all this discussion is there, but then if the living entity is still performing sinful activities, these are the hellish situation he has to go through. So till this point, if you see, although there are stories here and there and some incarnations of the Lord has been mentioned, but majorly speaking, lots of philosophy is being explained. And from sixth canto onwards, then the devotional aspect takes precedence. So sixth canto, the seventh canto, where Prahlad Maharaj's devotion is very nicely elaborated upon. Eighth canto, several instances of Lord's Leela with his devotees are there. And the ninth canto is the precursor to the actual Leela of Krishna in 10th canto. And from 10th canto we see it's all Leelas only. And after discussing all the Leela, the 11th canto comes, again we come back to philosophy. Correct? And then the 12th canto ends with glorification of Bhagavatam and how in future the material world is going to be. So we see, Srimad Bhagavatam is not compromising on the philosophy at all. We see several cantos are actually dedicated to understanding Vedanta philosophy. So, this is the reason, it's not just like that we are calling Srimad Bhagavatam as commentary on Vedanta Sutra. All the sutras have been explained very perfectly in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then there are Leelas also. But the Prakrti Sahajiyas, what they do, they will reject other scriptures because it's all philosophical, ritualistic, worship of demigods, all those things might be there. They'll accept Srimad Bhagavatam, but only those portions where the Leela of the Lord is mentioned. And other portions they will reject. And this is also prominent in, you see all this 7-day Katha that happens in Vrindavan, in other places and all. They do not speak philosophy. 4 hours, 5 hours Katha will happen, and after that, everybody will go back home and there is no transformation of heart. There is no elevation of consciousness. The Leelas are there, heard very nicely. They'll sing some songs also in between with nice harmonium, tabla, kartal, everything. But that's about it. It's entertainment. But Bhagavatam is not to be taken as entertainment. Vedanta philosophy is not for entertainment. It is a serious study for making progress in devotional service. Okay. Yeah. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati continues. Or rather, this is in Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, it's mentioned how he approached. So, he narrated, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati narrated an explanation given to him by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that these scriptures are of the same quality as Srimad Bhagavatam and thus never to be disrespected. And further clarified that particular passages in scriptures such as Mahabharata might be bewildering to asuras, karmis, jnanis and false devotees, but not to sufficiently qualified devotees. And that those Vedic mantras that apparently do not describe Vishnu, in fact do so exclusively. You see this? So, those Vedic mantras that apparently do not describe Vishnu. So, although these Vedic mantras may seem that it's not speaking about Lord Vishnu, but in fact, they do so exclusively. Say, not exclusively means they are exclusively speaking only about Lord Vishnu. They are not even speaking about other deities. But then it has to be understood in a proper manner. Yet, unless understood through Vidvad Rudhi, will indubitably be misunderstood. So, Vidvad Rudhi, there are three ways of understanding statements, of understanding words. It is Vidvad Rudhi, Sadharana Rudhi, and there is Agnya Rudhi. So, Vidvad Rudhi is to understand the statements of Vedic literatures as the enlightened people explain it. That is Vidvad Rudhi. So, those enlightened people are supposed to explain these statements of the other scriptures, Itihasas and Puranas. Sadharana Rudhi is the proper or the normal people, those who understand. And then Agnya Rudhi is the understanding of those people who actually do not have knowledge, who are actually in ignorance. So this is the difference between Vaishnava scholars and the Advaita scholars. The Advaita scholars' understanding of the statements or the words of the Upanishads falls under the category of Agnya Rudhi. Because what they do is they do not take the direct meaning. We will see that. There's Abhideya, there's Lakshana Vritti, there are other Upanishads. There are ways to understand the statements of the Upanishads. There is a direct understanding, and then there is an indirect understanding, and then there is the other type of understanding which is basically indicative. So when we are discussing the second ray, the second kiran of the second chapter of this particular work, we'll be able to elaborate that in more detail as to how these statements of Upanishads have to be understood, and how when they are misunderstood, then the complete meaning changes. Okay, so the impersonalist, the Mayavadis or the Advaitavadis, how they interpret these Upanishadic verses is completely convoluted because they do not take the direct meaning. Therefore, their understanding is incorrect. And this was pointed out by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also to Prakashananda Sarasvati, that your studies Vedanta Sutra is proper. The thought that you have to study Vedanta Sutra is okay. But then the way you approach it and your understanding of Vedanta Sutra is not direct. When the meaning is completely direct, then why do you have to take the indirect meaning? That is not required. So they follow this Agnya Rudhi, the understanding of words in ignorance. But that is not something, that was the plan of Shankaracharya also. We will discuss that as we go through. Srila Saraswati Thakur wanted to establish a Shastriya version that all Shastras are glorious because they glorify Hari. It is said, no? Vede Ramayane Chaiva Purane Mahabharate Tata Ada Antaucha Madhyecha Hari Sarvatra Giyate. So this is Madhvacharya, he quoted this. That's in Vedas, in Ramayana, in Puranas and Itihasas, Adau Madhye Cha Ante Cha Hari Sarvatra Giyate. From the starting, in the middle and at the end, Lord Hari is only glorified. So those who are not able to see that, they are actually in Agya Rudhi. No, they are not able to understand what is actually happening there. So scriptures have to be understood through parampara system. That's why the parampara system becomes very important. So he continues, therefore the Upanishads are treasured by genuine devotees who do not relegate them to the domain of speculative jnanis. He would quote the Upanishadic utterance, Sarve Veda Yat Padam Amananti, referring to the object, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, about which all the Vedas speak. And the Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, wherein Lord Krishna declares, Vedaishcha Sarvair Ahameva Vedyaha, all Vedic literature is meant for knowing me. He thus demonstrated that although most of the Upanishads appear not to indicate Krishna, he is their only subject matter, which means actually Krishna is the only subject matter of the Upanishads. The indirect approach of the Upanishads is paroksha, mysterious or encrypted, and is dear to Krishna. So 11th canto, Krishna specifically tells, this say that parokshavad is very dear to me. So if something is indicated in very cryptic or very different manner, then I like it. So because of that, the Upanishads are actually pleasing Krishna in that way, because they mention Krishna in a very indirect way. So this we see in the 87th chapter of 10th canto also, where the prayers of the Shrutis are there. So they are actually glorifying Krishna. So that is that they are, all the Vedic literatures are also personalities, and their expression of pleasing Krishna, of loving Krishna, is elaborated or expressed upon or expressed in the 87th chapter of 10th canto. So if you read specifically Krishna book, if you read in the 87th chapter, there we will see that all the Upanishads are actually, all the Shrutis are actually very dear to Krishna, and they are formed in such a way because they want to please Krishna by speaking about him in an indirect manner. But one who does not understand that, he thinks, okay, Krishna is not even there. So that is their misfortune. The Upanishads can be accepted in opposite ways. one that increases devotion and another that leads away from devotion, according to the attitude of the student. Dve Vidye, there are two kinds of education systems. Okay, so actually this is a reference from Mundaka Upanishad. So there are two kinds of education system. One that deals with transcendental knowledge, Paravidya, and the other with material knowledge, Aparavidya. The Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharva Vedas, along with their corollaries known as Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakaran, Nirukta, Chanda and Jyotish, belong to the inferior system of Aparavidya. By Paravidya, one can understand the Akshara, Brahman, the absolute truth. That is Mundaka Upanishad. So if one approaches the Vedic literatures or the Upanishads without considering Krishna, then it is this is Aparavidya only. But our Vedantic study, now we are studying Prakrti also. So is it classified as Aparavidya? No. Although we are studying the material nature, our study of material nature is actually not Aparavidya, it's Paravidya, because the goal is to come out of the bondage of Prakrti, to come out of this material world. So our study of Vedanta Sutra, this Vedanta Syamantaka is primarily Paravidya only. So there are two ways in which Upanishads can be understood. At Radhakund in 1935, Srila Saraswati Thakur further expounded this theme in a series of speeches explaining Shuddha Bhakti through the Upanishads. Correct? So this also happened. Everybody knew. So by that time, by 1935, Srila Saraswati Thakur, of course, was very famous. The Gaudiya Maths have been established at different places in India. I think the 64 Gaudiya Maths were established. He was a very prominent personality. And when he came to Radhakund, and it was said that he is going to speak at Radhakund, people thought, oh, such a great personality, such a great devotee is going to speak about Radha Krishna's pastimes. Now, what else will you speak in Radhakund? But then what happened? He started explaining the Upanishads. He did not speak about Krishna, Radha or anything. Okay, this is Ishvara. This is how it's supposed to be understood. Upanishads. So first day, all this, the Babajis who are there in Radhakund, they attended that seminar or the study of Upanishads. That happened first day. And from next day onwards, the attendance reduced. And finally, no Babajis came. So Srila Siddhanta Saraswati, he commented that these Babajis who claim to stay in Radhakund, actually they are not staying in Radhakund, they are staying in Narakakund. Because they are not interested in hearing the study of Upanishads on what we are discussing here. Unless there is a proper understanding of the Upanishads, then one cannot approach Radhakund. Correct? So again, we are stressing this point that although the study is called Vedanta Syamantaka, we are studying Vedanta Syamantaka, the approach or the goal is not to become a Jnani. The goal is, as elaborated in Nectar of Instruction, to go to the final destination that is there. But those Babajis, he said, they are actually living in Narakakund, they are not in Radhakund. Right? So he opened by quoting Srila Rupa Goswami on how the Upanishads worship the holy name of Krishna. He says, Nikhla Shruti Mauli Ratnamala Diti Nirajita Pada Pankajanta Ayimukta Kuler Upasyamanam Paritas Tvam Harinama Samshrayami. O Harinam, the tips of the toes of your lotus feet are constantly worshipped by the radiance emanating from the string of gems known as the Upanishads, the crown jewel of all the Vedas. You are eternally adored by liberated souls. O Harinam, I take complete shelter of you. So, the radiance which is emanating from the string of gems known as Upanishads is basically the holy name of the Lord. So by study of all the Upanishads, one should get attached to chanting Krishna's holy names. Debunking a common misconception, the harmonist essay Vishnu and Vaishnava demonstrated that Vishnu Bhakti is positively and amply described in the four Vedas. And to the frequent challenge that chanting the holy names, including the Mahamantra, was a recently introduced practice not mentioned in the Vedas, Srila Saraswati Thakur would reply with evidence from Rig Veda that the name of Vishnu is not only mentioned but highly glorified in the Vedas. Om Asya Jananto Namachit Vivaktan Mahataste Vishnu Samati Bhajamahe Om Tatsat. O Vishnu, your name is transcendental and thus self-manifest. Even without properly comprehending the glories of chanting your holy name, if we vibrate your name with at least a little insight into its glories, that is, if we simply repeat the syllables of your holy name, we shall gradually understand it. Correct? So this is there in the Shrutis, in the Vedas. So the holy name of the Lord is what we are trying to achieve. Firm faith in chanting the holy names of the Lord is, we can say, in a very succinct manner is the goal of this Vedanta Syamantaka study. And this is a very nice quote from Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada writes, in his Shikshashtaka, Lord Chaitanya said that one should be in a humble state of mind, should think himself lower than the grass on the street, should be more tolerant than a tree, and should be devoid of all sense of prestige and ready to offer all kinds of respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the Vedanta philosophy or the holy name of God constantly. Correct? So this is Vedanta philosophy. So one can chant the Vedanta philosophy, the conclusion of Vedanta philosophy, or the holy name of God constantly. Okay, so so now there is another aspect that we have to understand. If you see Srila Prabhupada's works, whenever he is speaking about Vedanta philosophy, he always quotes this verse, Vedeshcha sarvair ahameva vedyaha Vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. Okay. So this is in 5th chapter, 15th verse, and there are hundreds of Prabhupada's references in his lectures, in his conversations. Whenever someone asks him about Vedanta philosophy, he quotes this verse. Sarvasya chahamriti sannivishta mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedeshcha sarvair ahameva vedya Vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. So, this study or this particular verse is actually very important for understanding the Upanishads or Vedanta philosophy. This is similar to what Srila Jiva Goswami mentions in his Krishna Sandarbha. In Krishna Sandarbha, I think it's the 29th Anucheda, he mentions that the entire Srimad Bhagavatam has to be understood based on the Paribhasa sutra of Srimad Bhagavatam. I think many of you would have heard this. This Paribhasa sutra is Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So this comes in the first canto, 3rd chapter, I think 29th verse, if I remember correctly. It's Ete Chamsha Kala Pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Loke Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. So this chapter is elaborating or is explaining or it's detailing the different incarnations, the prominent incarnations of the Lord, both Vishnu Tattva as well as Jiva Tattva, the empowered incarnations as well as the direct plenary incarnations of the Lord. So all of them have been explained, and at the end, then Shukdev Goswami says, Ete Chamsha Kalapusha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Shri Jiva Goswami says that the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, the rest or the 18,000 verses which are there in Srimad Bhagavatam has to be understood in this light, with the understanding that the entire work is, with the understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not Vishnu, it is not Lord Ramachandra. So when it's, because the incarnations mention Lord Ramachandra also, the incarnations mention other Balaram and so many other, but Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is the understanding. And all the incarnations who have been explained in other portions of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is to be understood that they actually originate from Krishna alone. Okay, so they are Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, I'm not creating controversy. They are indeed Supreme Personality of Godhead. But then Prabhupada explains that there's a source candle and then there are other candles which can be lighted from that source candle. So Srimati Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. He is Bhagavan Swayam. He is Swayam Bhagavan. And other are his expansions, portions or portions of plenary portions. Amsha and Kala Pumsa, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So this is a defining statement of Srimad Bhagavatam. And similarly, in the 10th canto, I think 8th chapter, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he also comments on a verse, this 45th verse, so I'll just read it, it's not present here. The translation goes like this: the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are studied through the three Vedas, the Upanishads, the literature of Sankhya Yoga, and other Vaishnava literature. Yet Mother Yashoda considered that Supreme Person her ordinary child. Okay. Now, in commenting on this particular verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes that this is the Paribhasa Sutra for the entire understanding of the pastimes of Krishna in the 10th canto. So one has to understand that Krishna can be understood through these three, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the literature of the Sankhya Yoga and other Vaishnava literatures. So the Aishwarya or the glories or the opulence of Krishna has to be understood in this manner. And with that understanding, when we understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has all these different opulences which are explained in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in Sankhya Smrtis, in in other Vaishnava literature, Pancharatras and all. And then we come to the 10th canto and how he acted as an ordinary child out of love and affection for his devotees. Now it increases the devotion for the Supreme Lord within our heart. Okay, so that he explains in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that in his purport. So this is understanding of Krishna's pastime. This is again Sambandha Gyan. We understand Krishna in this manner through Vedas, through Upanishads. That understanding is there. And after that understanding, when we take up to the study of Krishna's Srila with his devotees, not only Mother Yashoda, but other devotees also with gopis and all other devotees whom he interacted with, which are explained in the 10th canto, then the appreciation for Lord's love increases manifold. Correct? Now there is, in a very mundane sense, if we have to give an example, if the person whom he love, whom we have affection for, whom we love for, is not a very important person. Correct? So love and affection is there. But then when we understand that a very important person also has same love and affection for me, he cares for me, he looks after me, he's always with me, he's my best friend, then the appreciation for that person or the emotion that we experience is enhanced because the Supreme Person, a very great person, actually knows me. So similarly, in that sense also, it's a mundane example, of course, but in the same way, when we understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Adhipati or the controller of the entire cosmic manifestation, not only this universe, but millions of universes which are there with with Brahmas, with thousands of heads, such huge universes, and he is there with each and every person, and he is the one who is managing, controlling everything, and his Aishwarya, his opulence, his Shakti, his energies. We understand all these things, and then he is acting like a small baby under the care of Mother Yashoda. When he is feeling hungry, he is crying for Mother Yashoda's breast milk. How to understand this? That increases our appreciation for how Krishna is reciprocating with his devotees. Correct? So that's why Srila Vishwanath Thakur says that this is the Paribhasa Sutra. Your entire 10th canto, if we understand in that way, then our appreciation, our devotion for the Lord increases manifold because Krishna is ready to reciprocate with us like this. So it's not that it's a one-way traffic. We are doing devotion to Krishna, but then Krishna is not doing anything for us. Or he is impersonal, or he does not even care. That reciprocation is there. The reciprocation will come if we do our practices properly, if we have proper understanding of Vedanta philosophy. And through that we understand, because it's mentioned here, right? The verse itself says that Supreme Lord has to be understood through the Vedas, Upanishads, Sankhya Yoga, Smrtis, and through Pancharatra scriptures. So we have to understand the opulence of the Lord, and that way we will be able to appreciate him, and Krishna also reciprocates in that way because we have proper understanding of Sambandha Gyan. We will be able to do the Abhideya process properly, and then Krishna reciprocates. That happiness comes. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that so many times in his discussions with others also, that these boys and girls, they do not know Krishna 1 year back, but now they have taken up Krishna consciousness. They did not go to this mundane cinema. They do not want to hear all these nonsensical songs. They do not want to engage in all illicit activities. They are completely dedicated to Krishna. They only want to do Sankirtan Yajna, want to distribute my books and perfect their life and go back home, back to Godhead. Because the taste has come. How did the taste come? Because Krishna reciprocated. Krishna reciprocated their dedication towards his pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada. So this is the understanding that we are supposed to get. Correct? Okay, so that's the elaboration of this particular verse. But what I actually wanted to focus on is that this should be taken as the Paribhasa Sutra of Krishna Lila. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains what Paribhasa Sutra is. He says, as a lamp sits in one place in a dark room and lights up the whole room, so that statement in the script, in the whole room, so that statement in the scripture which can reveal the meaning of all scriptures or regulate the meaning of the scriptures is called Paribhasa Sutra. This verse stands as a regulator for all the pastimes related to Aishwarya, displays of power and opulence, shown during Krishna's Kumara and Kaishora ages in Mathura, Kurukshetra and elsewhere. So this is the definition of Paribhasa Sutra, which means that it reveals the meaning of all scriptures and regulates the meaning of the scriptures. So that which reveals the meaning of all scriptures and which regulates all the scriptures is called as Paribhasa Sutra. So this particular verse which we are talking about, Vedescha Sarvai Rahame Vedya Vedanta Krit Veda Videva Chaham, although none of the acharyas have actually directly mentioned this as Paribhasa Sutra, from the work of Srila Prabhupada itself, from the explanations and also of the acharyas, we can actually understand that this acts as like the Paribhasa Sutra for the entire understanding the gamut of all Vedic literatures and specifically the Upanishads. So that is how we have to understand. So Vedanta Krit Veda Vid Eva Chaham. Okay, so we'll complete in 2 minutes. How it goes is that Krishna says that Vedeshu Sarvair Ahameva Vedyaha. From all the Vedic literatures, I am to be known. And then he says Vedanta Krit Vedavid Evachaham. So I am the one who compiled the Vedanta, and then I am the one who knows the Vedas. So Vedanta Krit Vedavid Evachaham. That is what he says. Now, in commenting upon this, all the acharyas, even Srila Prabhupada also, he says that Vedanta Krit, when it says Vedanta Krit, that Krishna created Vedanta or he compiled the Vedanta, Krishna actually means that as an incarnation of Vyasadeva, he compiled the Vedanta through that. And if we do a deeper analysis to this particular verse, Krishna says, Vedesha Sarvair Ahameva Vedyaha. From all the Vedic literatures, I am to be known. So, O Vyasadeva, when you compile Vedanta, you make sure that I am revealed through all this Vedantic philosophy. And Vedavit Eva Chaham, and I am the one who actually knows the Vedas. So Vyasadeva, so the first line, Krishna is speaking about himself, Vedesha Sarvair Aham Veda, I am to be known. And the next line, he is basically talking what Vyasadeva actually did. He compiled the Vedanta and he is the one who actually knows the Vedas. So because Vyasadeva is the one who actually gave all the Vedic literatures to us, the best person to know the goal of Vedanta or of all the Vedic literatures is Vyasadeva, correct? And if he is saying that Vedesha Sarvair Ahame Vedyaha, no, Krishna is claiming that, and the same thing is explained, and he's telling Vyasadeva also that this is what you're supposed to write in Vedanta also. So this acts as the defining statement for understanding the Upanishads, for understanding the Vedanta Sutra. So entire Vedic philosophy is meant to basically reveal who Krishna is, basically understand who Krishna is. That is proper understanding of the Vedanta philosophy. So we will stop today. We'll continue tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll read more references, and we will see how in different references Prabhupada quotes the same verse. So we'll be reading several references where the same verse will be quoted. Vedanta Krit Veda Videha Chaham, Vedesha Sarve Rama Vedyaha. But he brings out different nuances of understanding all this statement. So now those things we will see. And there are several references also, which again furthermore clarifies different Vedantic concept. So that we will try to do tomorrow. We'll try to move at a faster pace tomorrow because yesterday's class and today's session, I think we have got a better understanding of how the subject matter is to be approached and what should be our attitude when we are studying this Vedanta Syamantaka. So tomorrow we'll try to move a little bit faster, so that we can cover the different references and actually get into the subject matter of this book. Okay, so I'll stop here. So we have any, I think we can take one question. It's already late. Yes, bro. Yes.
Can you explain why there is Parokshavad?
Okay, so this is the question that Krishna likes Parokshavad, and the question is that why Krishna likes Parokshavad. So I think I'll have to do a quick search to go to that particular verse. Yeah, so this is a verse. This is from 11th canto, chapter 21, text 35. This is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. He says, Veda Brahmatma Vishayas Trikanda Vishaya Ime Parokshavada Rishayah Paroksham Mamacha Priyam. The Vedas divided into 3 divisions ultimately reveal the living entity as pure spirit soul. The Vedic seers and mantras, however, deal in esoteric terms, and I also am pleased by such confidential descriptions. Okay. So in the previous verses, Krishna referred to the concept of the Vedic knowledge meant for material enjoyment, and here the Lord summarizes the actual purpose of Vedic literature, self-realization. Although conditioned souls are struggling in the network of material energy, their actual existence is transcendental freedom in the kingdom of God. And the Vedas gradually lift the conditioned soul out of darkness. So one may ask, so here's the answer. One may ask why the Lord himself, as well as the Lord's representatives, the Vedic seers and mantras, speak in esoteric or indirect terms. As the Lord states in the Bhagavad Gita, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya, the Supreme Lord does not allow himself to be taken cheaply, and thus he is not manifest to superficial or inimical people. Those who are polluted by the material atmosphere are induced to purify themselves through Vedic rituals that offer fruitive results, just as a child is induced to take medicine by the offer of a candy reward. Because of the confidential nature of Vedic exposition, less intelligent persons cannot appreciate the ultimate transcendental purpose of the Vedas, and consequently they fall down to the platform of sense gratification. So, okay, just not, this one more. The term Brahmatma, spirit soul, ultimately indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states in the Bhagavad Gita that knowledge of him is Rajaguhyam, the most confidential of all secrets. One who depends upon material sense perception remains in gross ignorance of the absolute truth. One who depends upon mental and intellectual speculation may get a clue that the eternal soul and super soul are both within the material body. But one who depends upon the Lord himself, faithfully hearing the Lord's own message in the Bhagavad Gita, perfectly understands the entire situation and goes back to Godhead, having fulfilled the true purpose of Vedic knowledge. So I think the idea is here that the Lord does not allow himself to be taken cheaply. So we have been discussing that in this session, that one has to understand Vedanta philosophy, one has to come in parampara, basically. So one who follows in parampara, then he can understand the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But one who does not follow this Vedic process, we say, tad vijnanartham sagurum eva abhigachet. One who has to understand the transcendental science, he has to approach a spiritual master. It's imperative, it has to be done. It's not an option. Gachet, it's imperative, it has to be done. So that is the process through which Krishna reveals himself. So the Upanishadic statements are there because the Lord does not allow himself to be taken cheaply. Because that, if Krishna is to be understood very cheaply, then we will not take him seriously. And that is not going to affect him, that is going to affect us. Krishna is not affected by our understanding of him. No, it is going to affect us. So it's actually a mercy of Krishna when he gives, when he speaks in Parokshavad, or when he likes Parokshavad. Because that way, people will not take him cheaply, and one has to come in line of the parampara system to understand who Krishna is. So that way, the parampara system actually is quite important to understand who Krishna is. Without parampara, without being or without coming in a proper disciplic succession, one cannot understand Krishna. He says, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya. So that is why he likes Parokshavad, because he wants us to take him seriously. We should not take him cheaply. Okay. So I think we'll stop here. So thank you so much. So we'll continue tomorrow, and as we discussed, we'll continue with the references from Srila Prabhupada, and we'll try to get into the subject matter. Okay. So Srila Radha Damodar Goswami ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Premanand.